so happy that we finally got hooked up because I couldn't get on the internet when I first got here this morning. Welcome, everybody. In the room, we have Drew, John, Diane, Evelyn, Greg, Barbara, Captain Paul, Barry, Francis, and Liz. And welcome to our guest speaker, Audrey DeRose-Wilson. My opening words are from John James Audubon, of course. He who follows the feathered inhabitants of the forest and plains, however rough or tangled the paths may be, seldom fails to obtain the objects of his pursuit, provided he be possessed of due enthusiasm and perseverance. So that's what you need, right, Juanita? Perseverance and persistence to find those birds. I have some announcements this morning. Linda's coming back in. This coming Saturday, November 22nd, and Sunday, November 23rd, from 10 o'clock until 5 on Saturday and 4 on Sunday, Indian River County Fairgrounds in Vero Beach. We're going to be having, they're having their Holiday Art and Craft Expo, and we're going to be having a table there to raise awareness of humanists of the Treasure Coast, teaching others about humanism. We'll be there with an easy up pop-up tent, but it takes more than one person to set it up. I'm going to be there on Saturday from 10 to 2, and we hope others will sign up. And what you need to do is go onto our website under events and sign up. Come and help us and meet some other interesting people who probably are humanists and they're just finding out. Thursday, November 27th is our annual Friendsgiving from 3 to 7, depending on who's giving it and what's the location. This is for Thanksgiving, for people to get together and not be by themselves, to have some other humanists around if they would like. You can sign up on our website either as a host or as a guest. And then Greg is going to match the hosts with the guests and let people know what the groups are going to be.
So far, it's just me.
Saturday, December 20th, we're having our winter solstice luncheon. It's going to be at the Blue Ocean Grill out on their covered patio. That's up in Tradition, not too far from me and Drew and the folks of those of us who live up in the Tradition area. 8500 America Walks Boulevard. So that's going to be from noon until 2. You have to RSVP on the website to sign up for that because I have to give them a head count. And some sad news I have to give you that I just found this out yesterday. I think some of our older members may remember Virgil and Lucy Thorpe. Right. I ran into them at the 2023 convention up in Orlando, Free Flow Conference. The name just escaped me, the Free Flow Conference. And Virgil looked a little fragile to me. Yesterday, I got an email from Virgil that Lucy died. So I don't know how old she was, but she had taken a fall not too long ago, broke her arm. And when they got her into the hospital and ran a bunch of tests, they found some things that she had a big tumor. So she died this week. So I just wanted to let people who knew the Thorpes know about that. So this morning, our Humanist Secular Moment is being presented by Francis. Francis, do you want to come on up, please?
I'll do my best.
I know you will.
Until the tears start flowing. Sit down.
Yeah.
In celebrating the hopeful activism of our speaker today, Ms. Audrey DeRose-Wilson, the Humanist Moment is for celebrating hope and activism when it looks like the deck is stacked against us. My Aunt Betty was a card-carrying member of the Friends of the Everglades, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And it states on their website that they are dedicated to preserving America's Everglades and its interconnected ecosystems. It was founded in 1969 by renowned journalist, author, and environmental activist Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Their mission is to preserve, protect, and restore the only Everglades in the world. Their bold goals are to compel government agencies to comply with existing environmental laws and resist any efforts to weaken such laws, encourage politicians to recognize the long consequences of their actions, and spread awareness of the importance of the Everglades to the South Florida ecosystem. With these goals in mind, they've launched initiatives based in hope and activism. The Everglades Defense Fund to fuel their landmark lawsuit against the Everglades Detention Center and protect the irreplaceable ecosystems from other destructive proposals. As their website proclaims, no airports, no rock mines, no prisons, only Everglades. And their Everglades EduDome experience, a bold new initiative of their Young Friends of the Everglades education program, made possible by a $100,000 grant from the Impact 100 Martin County. Premiering in Martin County schools this year, this interactive adventure will inspire thousands of students to become the next generation of Everglades advocates. I'm almost done. According to the Education and Outreach Director, Ms. Amanda Purnell, some students can't travel to the Everglades, so we're bringing the Everglades to them. Imagine a giant satellite map of the Everglades stretching across a classroom floor, allowing students to travel the path of water as it makes its way through the greater Everglades. Or picture the wide-eyed fascination of an elementary or middle schooler immersed in a 360-degree film that brings the river of grass into their school. As the Education and Outreach Director for Friends of the Everglades, these are the views she says she can't wait to share with the students. They're about to be a reality with our introduction. Oh, you don't know that part. So I will leave you with this Emily Dickinson poem, but I think I'm going to ask. Do you want to read it?
I'll read it.
I'll get teary. I just will.
And I just want to mention to you that Frances is the one who coordinated our guest speaker today. So thank you for that, Frances. Hope is the thing with feathers. I don't know if I can read it. Emily Dickinson.
I can read it.
Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the true tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the strangest sea, yet never in extremity it asks a crumb of me. A good one for today. So I welcome our guest speaker today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. We are so fortunate to have her, and I appreciate her giving us her time. Excuse me. Her presentation is called Florida Scrub Jay, only in Florida. Audrey DeRose-Wilson. As Audubon Florida's Director of Bird Conservation, Audrey focuses her efforts on bird conservation and policy, including overseeing Audubon's coastal and Florida scrub jay conservation partnerships with agencies and other organizations, and leading grant-based fundraising with public and private foundations for both. Audrey came to Audubon, Florida after serving as the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commissioner's Florida Shorebird Program Lead and supervising its regional non-game biologists. Prior to FWC, she worked as a shorebird biologist and avian program manager for the Delaware Division of Fish and Wildlife, where she notably managed the volunteer-based Delaware Shorebird Project that entailed capture, banding, data collection, and analysis of migratory shorebirds, including federally threatened red knots. In this role, Audrey also represented the state of Delaware on the Atlantic Flyway Council, Atlantic Coast Joint Venture, and several Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency committees. She has also worked as a research scientist for Virginia Tech, studying the post-storm population dynamics of piping plovers. In addition to her extensive background with water birds, she has substantial banding and conservation experience with passerines, especially grassland birds. She earned an MS in Fish and Wildlife Conservation from Virginia Tech and a BS in Zoology from Michigan State. We welcome you wholeheartedly, Audrey. Thank you so much. The podium is yours.
Thank you for that welcome and introduction, and thank you for inviting me to talk about Florida scrub jays. I'm just gonna see if I can get screen sharing going without any more technical difficulties.
We can see that.
You can see it? Oh,
Yes.
good. Yay. All right, I'm glad that worked. So
I
this
have
is the bird
Go
that
ahead.
I will be talking about, the Florida scrub jay here. And I'll just start. So it sounds like some of you are definitely familiar. Oops, I'm not advancing. There we go. Is my slide advancing now?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, so it sounds like some of you are definitely familiar with the Florida scrub jay, but I'll just give a brief overview of the species and then talk about some of its habitat needs and what we can do to help it. So as you mentioned already, the Florida scrub jay is very special here in Florida. It's our only endemic bird species, which means that it's found only here and nowhere else. They depend on well-managed scrub habitat, and they are listed as federally threatened under the Endangered Species Act, and that's as a direct result of habitat loss. In fact, their population has declined by about 90% since European settlement. And this is as a result of conversion of the upland habitat that they need to agriculture, development, fire suppression also drives these declines by reducing the quality of the habitat that remains. And as a result, a lot of the scrub jays, particularly the ones the Audubon's Jaywatch program manages or monitors, are small populations that are in isolated patches of remaining scrub habitat. And so as a result, these small populations are at risk of further declines because there's not connectivity between these populations to allow for birds to move and for genetic genes to flow between the populations as well. They're a very interesting bird in their own right. One of the things that is unique about them is that they're cooperative breeders. Only about 3% of birds in the world are cooperative breeding. And what this means is that helpers, usually these are the older siblings, but not always, it can be a unrelated bird, help parents raise the youngest brood of chicks. And within a family group of scrub jays, there can be up to 6 helpers, in addition to the breeding male and female. And the helpers help defend the territory. They help feed and protect the young. They basically do everything that the adult birds do in that family to help everybody survive. And these are just a few pictures of scrub jay nestlings and eggs in their little stick nests. They nest in scrub oaks, usually not very high off the ground, like somewhere between 4 to 6 feet from the ground. And the nestlings stay in this nest for a little while, but then before they can fly, they come out and they become what we call branchlings. And they kind of they can't fly yet, but they move around in the thick vegetation on the branches, which is why they're called branchlings. But they remain independent for quite a while after hatching. 85 days, they're depending on their parents and those helper birds to feed them, even after they long after they've come out of the nest and are moving around. And what do they eat? Well, mostly acorns, although at certain times of the year, other food sources are really critical for them. But talking about the acorns for a minute, an individual bird can cache or bury up to 8,000 acorns per year. And they don't just bury them once and then, come back when they're ready to eat them. It's kind of like a garden for them. They tend it and they manage it. They check on those acorns. They dig them up. If they're getting too much moisture and starting to mold, they move them or eat them. So it's a very intensive process for them. But at certain times of the year, particularly when they're raising their nestlings, they need a higher protein food source. So that's when arthropods like caterpillars, insects, spiders, and even small vertebrates, and even sometimes small mammals, they will eat anything they can that's a rich food protein source, make up an important part of their diet too. Yeah, so just a little bit more about the acorns. While they're tending them and managing them, they also differentiate between different acorns from different tree species. So white oak acorns have a low tannin content, which makes them tastier, but they don't keep as long. And red oak acorns have higher tannin, less tasty, more of that kind of bitter puckery taste if we were to be eating them, but they last longer. And so the scrub jays eat the white oak acorns first and save the red oak acorns for later on, when they need them, towards the end of the season. And so this is the habitat that they need. They are very much habitat specialists. It's a dry upland habitat, Florida scrub, also scrubby flatwoods is a habitat that they can make do in. But what they really need is short oak shrubs, so 4 to 6 feet tall. If you're in good scrub habitat, most of us should be able to see a long distance over the top of those scrub oaks. They need bare sand because they're catching all of those acorns, and so they need some access to bare sand to do that. And just a few tall trees. If there gets to be more than a few tall trees, like a lot of people say 1 to 3 per acre, it creates, the habitat favors scrub jay predators like Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks and other avian predators. It favors those predators too much, and the jays become too vulnerable. And so they are, less likely to thrive and be able to raise their babies in that kind of habitat. And where you find this habitat in Florida, if you look at a map of where scrub jays occur now, or especially where they've occurred historically, it's a very interesting range. It's kind of these two ridges that go down, these two kind of spines of habitat that go down either side of the state. And that's because this kind of upland habitat occurs where there were ancient sand dunes when Florida had the coast was in a different place than it is now. These sand dunes built up, and as the water receded and Florida got bigger, these sand dunes were kind of ridges in the interior part of the state. And that became our upland habitat in Florida, our sandhill and Florida scrub, and that's where the scrub jays are. This is just another look at that habitat. It has this really unique aerial signature, so you can look around in aerial images of Florida in Google Earth or Google Maps or something, and you can see this signature. And whenever you see that, and sometimes it's really faint because it's scrub habitat that's overgrown and in poor quality, but wherever you see that, you know that is a really classic scrub habitat. So how do we keep this habitat optimal for scrub jays? Historically, this was through burning, either from lightning. Florida, as you probably know, is the lightning capital of the US, and through indigenous fire practices, people managing the land with fire. Scrub habitat needs to burn at roughly 20-year intervals to be suitable for jays. In some types of scrub, like especially coastal scrub, it needs to burn even more frequently because it gets a little more rain and grows more quickly. And then it's also important, scrub jays have these territories, these family territories, and they do not move around very much. They're non-migratory. And so when you burn, it's important that it's not a massive burn covering a whole area, but there's some way of kind of doing a mosaic of burned and unburned habitat, so that ideally a scrub jay family still has some unburned habitat that they can occupy while the burned area regenerates. Because as you can kind of see in the first few years post-burn, there's not a lot of cover. Those oak shrubs haven't recovered enough to be producing acorns, and so they need a refuge while that's happening. 3 to 4 years in most areas, they can start to move back into that habitat, and it's providing for them sufficiently. And this figure down here is just showing some research that's been done with scrub jays. Show the green with the little fire icons is meant to show kind of how the population fluctuates. It decreases when a burn is needed, and then you apply that burn, and then you see the population respond to it. That's kind of just a classic classic population response to the habitat management. And this is what happens when scrub habitat is not burned. It becomes very overgrown. The scrub oaks become very dense. As you can see in this picture, there's numerous tall sand pines. Very little open sand patches remain. The only ones that you'll find are kind of human-made with roads or fire breaks, that kind of thing. And this is not a place where scrub jays will do well. And this shows a little bit of why they do more poorly in that overgrown habitat. This is some work that was published a long time ago in 1984 by researchers at Archbold Biological Station, who have been monitoring scrub jays from then until now, the same birds. But if you look at this part that has the red box around it, you see that in the dense, tall habitat, they produce fewer fledglings, 1.35, I think that says, compared to low and open, which is the optimal kind of habitat for scrub jays, where they produce more than 2 fledglings per pair. And then same thing when you look at the yearlings, almost twice as many of those birds, or more than twice as many of those birds, survive to be yearlings in the optimal habitat. So the juveniles are in overgrown scrub. They get less food. They're more vulnerable to predation. More research from Archbold has shown that when birds are in more overgrown scrub habitat, they spend more time being vigilant, which takes away from the time that they could be foraging and feeding their babies. So those babies they grow more slowly, they get less food and remain more vulnerable to predators, or even if the habitat's really poor, they're more vulnerable to predation as well. Or starvation, starvation. So why have we lost so many scrub jays from so many places? It turns out that upland habitat that they like is in really high demand in swampy Florida. So a lot of it has been converted into agricultural, citrus farms, development. If you are in a neighborhood and you're kind of like going up and down on these little hills, that likely was scrub habitat in the past, and it's very desirable, obviously, in Florida for people's homes. And you can even find in some of these more urban areas, jays will persist for a little while, but they face a lot of threats, and these populations pretty much always decline. And you can imagine cats, all of the other things that we bring into the human environment, cars, collisions with cars, even finding alternative food sources. So like we talked about if there's feeders, they will go to that as an easy source of food. It can be really helpful sometimes, but they're not likely to find at those feeders the high protein and really nutrient rich food that their babies need. So the babies suffer, and then their reproductive success goes down when they're feeding them peanuts or bird seed instead of caterpillars and arthropods. Also a lot of times in a landscaped suburban environment, people are they're choosing to plant plants and trees in their yard that will not be eaten by bugs. And so therefore there's not the bugs there for the birds to get. So this is just a quick look at some of the more recent population trends since we've been monitoring this species. There have been a few different censuses done. So you can see in 1890, we are estimating that we had about 40,000 scrub jays. By 1987, we already had about 20,000. That decline has continued. The most recent census that we have results for is from 2011. Another census has been completed from 2024, and the results will be published hopefully by the end of this year or early next year. So it will be very interesting to see, and we are of course all hoping that that trend will, if not have leveled off, even have gone up slightly in response to some of the habitat management that that we're working very hard to do for this species. This map shows counties that where there historically were scrub jays and counties that still have scrub jays. If you look at this legend here, you see all the red counties scrub jays have been extirpated from, including most of the South Florida counties that used to have scrub jays. This is obviously a very developed part of the state, and I think they just lost too much habitat to persist in this part of the state. And then if you look at these counties in blue, this is where we still have very large or the largest populations of scrub jays. Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge has a big population. It's become increasingly difficult to manage that site as there are much more frequent space launches now. And you can imagine if there's going to be a space launch, there's a prohibition on burning. And so if you go from like a few dozen or a dozen or so space launches per year to 300 per year, that means most days out of the year, there's going to be a prohibition on burning that habitat. So it's become very difficult to manage. Ocala National Forest is by far the largest scrub jay population, and managers there have been working very hard to harvest timber in a way that creates good habitat for scrub jays. And so this is probably our most optimistic scrub jay population, just because of the size, the resilience, and the good management that's happening there. And then Lake Wales Ridge, I mentioned some research that was done by Archibald Biological Station. They are a research center that is based in Lake Wales Ridge, and they've done a lot of work with scrub jays for years. This is another very developed area, but there are a number of different protected lands in this region that create a stronghold for the jays. Palm Beach County, sadly extirpated from there, but we do have our southernmost population, which is at Jonathan Dickinson State Park in Martin County. This is a good-sized population. You can see it's about 30, I think 35 is how many different family groups we have, which is indicated by that little orange circle, and somewhere between 120 and 140 individual birds. So that is a good sized and healthy population of scrub jays at Jonathan Dickinson. And this is our southernmost population for the species now. even though it is a state park, I'm sure a lot of you remember when this happened, the safety and habitat protections for the jays is still not secured. There were plans a couple years ago to create golf courses, 2 of them specifically at Jonathan Dickinson, hotels, pickleball courts, a lot of other facilities at a bunch of other parks across the state. The golf courses at Jonathan Dickinson would have been built right through the heart of the scrub jay habitat. Fortunately, there was a huge outcry, and the plans were dropped for now, but it will not be the last attempt to do something like this at one of our state parks or other scrub jay habitats. So even when you think you have protected it and it's being managed, you have to stay vigilant and keep working to protect it. Another thing that this is an example of Malabar scrub habitat. This is in Brevard County. This particular site had become quite overgrown, and the managers were trying to restore the scrub habitat, make it more suitable for scrub jays. And to do that, they needed to remove a lot of the bigger trees on the landscape. And local user groups, bikers, and other people who are used to the site didn't want to see that kind of change. And you can imagine you have like all these big, beautiful oaks, shaded paths, like it's very attractive from a people standpoint. But it was important, this land was purchased to be habitat for scrub jays, and it was important that it was serving that purpose. So there was a lengthy fight, multiple years between the county and the town and these different user groups to try to come up with a way to compromise and keep some of the landscape features that people wanted, but to make it more suitable for scrub jays. Eventually, we had jay watchers and scrub jay supporters rallying persistently for over 2 years at these county commission meetings and town commission meetings. And eventually they prevailed. The habitat was restored. There's a good population and growing population of scrub jays there now, but that really is as a result of the endurance that these advocates for the scrub jays had, and that they were willing to turn up over and over again and speak out and lend their voice. And they worked really effectively with the town and with the county and with the other user groups to try to find a compromise solution, which ultimately they did. So that's another very important thing that scrub jays still need from us. Even once the land has been preserved, they need people speaking out for the kind of management that will allow them to persist.
What was the compromise?
So there were some well, I say mountain, but there were some biking trails in there that were in these under these beautiful shaded oaks. And what they did was they shifted some of the trails outside of this property to follow creeks and other landscape features that wouldn't be suitable to be converted into scrub habitat on some adjacent property. And so they had to work with the property owners on the adjacent property to move the trails there. So ultimately they preserved as much of the trails that the bikers and hikers were using as possible. They moved them to new places. They still had the tree canopy that people wanted, and then they were able to do the restoration for the scrub jays. And I'm hoping, like, now that people have seen, you can imagine when a fire like this happens, it looks very changed. It can look like a lot of destruction, but then you see the renewal and you see the scrub habitat start to come back, and you see the scrub jays start to come back. So I am hoping as people see that change, they say, oh, like, now I see what we were going for. Yeah, so it is important to have that support and for the resources and for the management that we need to restore and maintain these healthy uplands. a lot of times people don't understand the role of fire in shaping Florida's upland habitat. When I came to Florida, somebody told me everything in Florida is either shaped by fire or water, every landscape. It's either either the way it is because of water or the way it is because of fire. And that's certainly true for the scrub jay habitat. They need fire, and in order to apply fire to the landscape, we need public support and understanding for what the fire is doing and why it's important, and how it's a really critical tool in keeping these uplands suitable, not just for Florida scrub jays, but for all of the rare and endemic species that occur in scrub habitat. So another thing I wanted to mention is Audubon Florida's Jaywatch program. Another thing that people could do to help Florida scrub jays is participate in community science efforts like this program, or anything else that gets you involved in conservation in your community. Jaywatch monitors about 46 sites, and these symbols on the map are kind of the approximate my best attempt to put them where they belong on the map. We help collect data that then supports habitat management. So we tell land managers how the scrub jays are doing on their property, and then the land managers use that information to determine when and where and how to manage to keep those areas good for scrub jays. Jaywatch, it's a statewide consistent methodology that we have now been using. Next year will be our 25th anniversary. So we have 24 years of data using this protocol. And it helps volunteers collect the data. I analyze the data and send reports back to the land managers, and this helps them evaluate the effectiveness of their past management practices. It helps to inform future management plans. And another thing that this program does is it helps to raise awareness about that scrub ecosystem and about Florida scrub jays and what they need to help turn that decline around. And you can imagine, once people are going out and helping to collect this data and learning about scrub jays, they're taking that information back to their communities and back to their families. A lot of times then they are bringing somebody from their life to help with the survey again next year. So it's a very fun and rewarding program to be a part of, and the volunteers are just incredibly dedicated. And one of the other ways that they help are like with the Malabar scrub issue. Once they've learned about scrub jays and what they need, people feel confident and comfortable speaking out about that, and they feel like they have some expertise, and then they can do things like turn up for several years at county commission meetings and give the jays a voice and talk about what they need, and help get a good conservation outcome. We do the surveys in June and July, which is not the ideal time to be in scrub habitat, but that's it when it's important for us to be out there, because it's when the juvenile jays have left their nests, so we can see them and count them, but they still have their baby plumage, so they look different from the adults. So a key part of the information that Jaywatch is collecting is the reproductive success for each family group. So we want to know how many babies there are, because that's our first indicator of if the quality of habitat is improving, or if it's declining, then we will see less babies out there. So that's why our volunteers, who are very dedicated and very tough, go into the field in June and July to help with these surveys. The surveys take place across 3 consecutive days. Because of heat affecting both the birds' activity and, more importantly, our volunteers, we never stay out past noon. And in fact, if it's a very hot survey period, as it has been the last few years, we'll wrap up at 11 just to get people out of there. So we get started early in the morning, but finish up by 11 or noon. And we work in teams, which allows us to bring new volunteers into the program all the time. We do provide some training opportunities, both in person and online, but you would never be sent out to complete a survey on your own after just participating in those surveys. We always have people working in teams and working with experienced volunteers or staff. These are just some other users of the JWatch data in addition to the land managers. We share our data with researchers, with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, regulatory agencies. And then we share our data with private consultants who are doing development projects. And we say, well, consider this before you get too far into your planning. You have scrub jays on your property, and that is going to be something that you need to address. And hopefully if they get that information early, they have a chance to adjust their project and avoid or minimize impacts to scrub jays. So here's just a little bit more information about how you can see on our webpage, you can see all of our past reports. You can see articles we've written about scrub jays. If you are interested in learning more about JWatch, you can sign up for information there, and then you will be alerted to when we're holding our trainings and surveys and other events. And I think that is, yep, so that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions now, and my contact information is up on the screen if anybody wants to get in touch with me after this.
Audrey.DeRose-Wilson at audubon.org. Thank you so much. Very informative. Just leave it up for a minute and we get to,
Sure.
everybody wants to, you're getting some hearts. All right. Does anybody have, I have to ask you to take that down because I have to be able to see my audience if they want to.
Sure, I can, let me figure out how to stop the screen sharing. My screen is.
Don't feel bad. I do this every Sunday.
There we go.
I always mess something
Oh,
up.
here we go. Stop share.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. That was so informative that, you know, it, in terms of habitat, it made me think. I'm from Connecticut. In the mid 1850s, 1800s, New England was 75% clear land and 25% forested because they cut down the trees to burn wood. And so you couldn't find a deer in New England. And now it's the exact opposite, 75% forested, 25% clear. They have, you know, hunting parties to go out and try to reduce the population of deer in New England. That made me think of like the scrub jay, and when they don't have their habitat, they're just not going to be there. All right, does anybody have any questions? We have a couple of people. Can you, Barry, pass the mic back to Drew and then Diane?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. I actually have a caged bird, and I enjoy it. Is the scrub jay ever put in a cage? Do people have them as like pets? And the other thing is I would ask is, I'm kind of familiar with Jonathan Dickerson Park. I love the place. It's wonderful, and it looks like a perfect place for the scrub jays. And I guess, do they fly out of that area and maybe to some of the areas around there?
Yeah, those are great questions. As far as keeping scrub jays in cages or as pets, they are protected by two laws. The Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which makes it illegal to possess the bird or any parts of the bird, like a feather or an eggshell, anything like that, without a permit. So no, a permit would not be issued to keep one in captivity because they are one of our native species, and it's important that they are out there doing what they should do. They also probably would not thrive very well in captivity because they are so social. And so you'd have to have like the whole family group, and then you'd have to have like scrub habitat and all of that. They're also protected by the Endangered Species Act because they are an imperiled species that has declined so much. So that's an additional kind of protection that they have that doesn't just protect them from being like possessed or captured, but also lends some kind of protection, although not nearly what people like myself wish they had. It lends some kind of protection to their habitat as well. And then as far as leaving Jonathan Dickinson State Park, that's a very interesting question about scrub jays, and that's one of the reasons probably that they have been so affected by how fragmented the habitat has become. They're non-migratory, so they stay here in Florida for their whole lives. But what's more, they stay within a couple miles of where they hatched out, most birds. They do not fly very far. They're like the most homebody of birds you can imagine. So most of those birds in Jonathan Dickinson State Park will stay right there. You do get some birds that disperse. Not Jonathan Dickinson is far enough away. We get especially some birds coming north to south, but they usually stop at some of the other populations that are just a little bit north of Jonathan Dickinson. So there's not very much genetics exchange between Jonathan Dickinson and other scrub jay sites. The other thing that happens, they probably disperse more than we are aware of, but they encounter so many threats. And you can imagine if you're a little scrub jay at Jonathan Dickinson and you're dispersing, looking for some new habitat, you don't even have a sense of where to go to find that next little dot on the map that's going to be habitat. Like your target is so small. So probably when birds do disperse, they're likely not to make it successfully onto new habitat. They get lost and they, face cars and cats and all kinds of threats along the way and don't survive.
Thank you. Juanita.
Wonderful presentation. Thank you, Audrey.
Thank you.
You probably know, but maybe our audience doesn't know about how special Indian River County is and the Pelican Island Audubon School. And so I'd just like to briefly say that the kids that were in this Pelican Island school realized that development was happening all around it. And they said, what's going to happen? These scrub jays, and they'd been learning about them, and it's right next to it, and they have trails into part of the habitat, and it's educational. And they said, we've got to save this. And they started holding bake sales to raise money. And the principal said, oops, we better contact people to raise funds for us. So they did contact our chapter, and the principal became a board member, and the kids helped to raise the funds to protect this habitat. And it is a small area, and it needs always addressing, like cutting the trees, which, and then we also have another very dedicated woman who was in the Scrub Jay Corps, and she took it upon herself to purchase lands that are nearby and and help to expand the area of scrub trees nearby. And she just recently died, but she gave the property to the county, and they manage it. But we need to really address. And one year we did take the effort to cut down some of the taller pine trees for Christmas trees and sold them in order to raise some funds for the project. But I think
that is such a great story, and such a such a good example of people, in this case, school kids, making a difference and raising awareness. And yeah, that is an incredible story.
And
We're
it's a
gonna-
very special habitat, and you can come visit. And we'd like, anybody that wants to come visit, I'll take you there.
We're going to go to Diane Morgan and then Irene. Diane.
Thanks for that great presentation. I hope you come and talk to us at Pelican Island Audubon sometime. I'd love to see our scrub jays become our state bird instead of the mockingbird or the proposed flamingo, because they are our only endemic bird. And I also wanted to mention such a great idea about educating people like you're doing right now. I know I used to walk in a scrub area, and the scrub jays had become so habituated to people, they would land on your head. You could just hold your hand up and they'd land on your hand. And I noticed that along a bridge I walked on, people had been feeding the scrub jays lines of peanut shells. So I thought, So I went home, I made a sign explaining that we all love our scrub jays and why this totally plant-based diet wasn't sufficient for them and hurt the babies and so on. I laminated, I tacked it up to the bridge, and it stopped. The feeding stopped immediately, and I had it up there for about 18 months. People want to do the right thing, I think. They just don't know what the right thing is. Eventually, the state came and the county came and they took my sign down. They put their own sign up, which wasn't as good, but it was better than nothing. Instead of a just plain old "don't feed the scrub jays," explaining why is so helpful to people, because people really do. And I also want to mention, I didn't know there were so few left. We now apparently have more manatees than scrub jays. Odd.
Wow.
That's great. Yes, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. In a lot of places, the scrub jays they're charismatic, they're curious, they will approach you, particularly if they've been fed, they will approach you. That's super fun for people. But getting that message out that like this is actually not helping them, it's key. There are a number of our Jay Watch sites, people used to feed the scrub jays a lot, and in general it just takes a sign, and most people, once they understand what they should be doing, they don't do that. And sometimes if you sit still, the scrub jays are so curious that they will come right down and check you out and sit on you anyways, and you can have that up close encounter with them.
Thank you. Irene, you're next.
Hi, just two little things. I think you mentioned that the scrub jay doesn't fly very far anyway, but for people who are not familiar with Dickinson State Park, it's 4 miles deep from the time you enter US 1 and go all the way back, and I don't even know. I think it must go on for a mile, width-wise. So I'm sure they have plenty of habitat right there, and probably wouldn't have to go much farther. And I wasn't able to interpret your map fast enough, but years ago I had a friend who moved onto Scrub Jay Lane in Port Charlotte, and I had never heard the word before, and I just thought that was fascinating. But the fact that it was such a huge development, big golf course community, I'm wondering if they didn't destroy the habitat. Do you know if there's any good habitats on the West Coast there? If you're familiar where
There is, there's some habitat. We have a couple of Jay Watch sites there, and then the county monitors some scrub jays there, but it's remnants of habitat, small isolated populations surrounded by the development. So, it's likely that Scrub Jay Lane was scrub habitat that was full of scrub jays, and you find that a lot, like Heron Court or Scrub Jay Lane, and it's like, yeah, that's what it was, but not now.
Yeah, sad. Thank you. Great.
Linda, and then Francis. Linda.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I live right down the street from that Pelican Island scrub jay habitat, and I'm motivated now to walk through there. But in the Sebastian area, there's a few areas set aside for them, and I'm just wondering, is St. Sebastian State Park, does it have habitat for scrub jays? I know
Yes,
when it does, okay,
and it's protected too. And there's
okay,
scrub jays watching there.
okay,
Scrub jay monitors.
great.
Mhm.
I wondered how much habitat is needed, like, for a scrub jay family, like how many acres is needed to sustain
Mhm. Yeah, so it does vary a bit. It depends on the quality of the habitat, but kind of the standard answer would be 20 acres for a scrub jay family. You will find some places like Lyonia Preserve is a good example, which is a really fun place. I recommend going. It's got a lot of scrub jays. They're very accessible. They're very curious there. They have way more birds packed into that site than like the literature would say should be able to survive there. So it does vary a good bit. One of the reasons they have so many birds in Lyonia Preserve is because there used to be a lot of scrub habitat surrounding, and it became developed. The birds were pushed out of it. Some of them, I'm sure, didn't survive, but the ones that did were all kind of crammed into Lyonia. But they have managed to sustain that population in much smaller territory sizes than would be typical. But yeah, the standard answer is they need about 20 acres.
So it sounded like too what you were saying about looking at the population. So there must be some genetic testing that maybe is done periodically. I'm just wondering what kind of sample do you take for genetic testing?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways that you can get genetic information. One is through like just like the tiniest little pinprick, and you use a little capillary tube that will suck up a teeny drop of blood. You don't want to take too much, obviously, from a bird like a scrub jay. This would happen if you're banding birds and you have a permit to
Mhm.
band the birds. Then you could get an additional authorization to do this tiny blood draw. You can also pluck a feather if from a place where it's not going to impact the bird, and it will have a little enough little bit of DNA on the end of it that you can get DNA from that. But yes, people do very much look at the genetics of scrub jays, and in fact, the bigger population across Florida has been divided into these smaller units called genetic units of birds that are more similar genetically to each other. As they become isolated on these smaller populations or even larger populations, one of the things that happens is the genetic diversity of the population as a whole goes down, which means that they're less healthy and less resilient. We think that that's what was happening at Jonathan Dickinson a few years ago. They were doing a lot of habitat management, and their population, rather than growing in response to the habitat management, was declining. And they're like, what's going on here? They did some genetic testing. They saw that they had low genetic diversity in the population and declining. And they said, okay, like, this population is not genetically healthy anymore. So they did some what they call genetic rescue translocations. They took some birds from Ocala National Forest, which you remember is by far the largest scrub jay population. It has by far and away the most genetic diversity in that population. So they took a few birds from Ocala National Forest, not intending to augment the population per se at Jonathan Dickinson by adding birds, but to augment the genetics by bringing new genetic diversity in. And so when you do that, you don't need to bring very many new birds as long as they're pretty successful, which they tend to be. So they did that, and you remember from that map that I showed, they have an increasing population again. And so it does seem like the genetic rescue was what was needed, and it's being successful. But yeah, once they become isolated, that is an important part of the conservation of the species.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, great story.
Frances had her hand up, and then Captain Paul.
Hi, thank you. I'm hearing about this push for data centers, and these states and cities are like, oh yeah, we want that. There's one in Fort Pierce being considered. I guess there's one up by you or up in Indian River County. I'm in St. Lucie County. Are you hearing, you know, aside from the golf courses and all that garbage that they tried to put onto Jonathan Dickinson, are you hearing much about the push for these data centers near any of the scrub jay habitats? Because I know it affects the water wherever these centers are.
I haven't heard any specific instances, especially in your region, but that's probably just because I'm not there. Another thing that Jaywatch does is it creates informed and passionate people throughout the entire state. And so people do, it's not just me, you know, somehow hearing about something happening in another part of the state, but you know, our Jaywatchers, our local Audubon chapters hearing about it and then working to try to do something about it. So just because I'm not hearing about it does not mean it doesn't happen. But I think like that information is usually passed to me from people who are the eyes and ears on the ground. There is, I'm in Alachua County. The closest scrub jays to me are in Marion County, not too far away. I'm pretty near the Marion County border. But there is a big and important population in Marion County that has a big development going in next to it that we have been involved with trying to get some kinds of accommodations to minimize the impacts on scrub jays. That one's not a data center, it's something else. But I definitely am aware of that for that site, but I'm sure it's happening elsewhere as well.
Thank you, Captain Paul.
Very good presentation, thank you. I don't endemic just to mean common to, not limited. And so thank you for expanding my vocabulary, but that it made me wonder, why are the scrub jays endemic, now that I know that meaning, to Florida?
Yeah, Florida is unique in that it shares a lot of, so there are other scrub jay species, not the Florida scrub jay, but related, that are out west. Just like out west, there's gopher tortoises, but then in Florida, we have gopher tortoises, and burrowing owls are the same. So Florida is a unique little peninsula that shares a lot of geological and kind of species, geological characteristics and species with some of the Western states, but then over geological time, they were basically separated. The state of Florida was separated from those more Western populations, and the species here in Florida continue to evolve. And so now we have the Florida burrowing owl, the gopher tortoise that's here in Florida, the Florida scrub jay, and they have become unique. So for example, the more Western scrub jays, they don't have the same social structure. They move around a lot more on the landscape. They are much more adapted to surviving in neighborhoods than the Florida scrub jay is. So I think it's just Florida's a very interesting place, and we have a lot of endemics in the scrub habitat. We talk about the Florida scrub jay a lot because they're easy to find, they're charismatic, but the scrub habitat in general is just packed with these rare endemics that are found nowhere else in the world. Plants, bugs, a lot of other mammals as well, and herps and reptiles and amphibians.
Wow. Could you pass the mic down to Evelyn? And then we'll go to Juanita and Richard.
Could you speak to, first of all, thank you for that great presentation. Could you speak to the Everglades and whether it's a good or not good environment for scrub jays?
Scrub jays need upland habitat. So remember how I mentioned like everything in Florida is shaped by fire or water. Scrub jays need upland habitat shaped by fire, and the Everglades is critical to like the overall functioning ecosystem, but it's too wet for scrub jays, too lush, too overgrown.
I can remember the first time I drove east to west across the middle of Florida, and I'm like, where did this beach come from? You know, right in the middle of Florida, because the coast was not where it is today. It was just a strip of land that went up through the middle with beach on either side. And when you pay attention after you see something like that. Juanita or Richard? Not sure who wants to speak.
Yeah, it was a great talk. I enjoyed it very much. And Florida was isolated, just like an island for many, many years too. But when one parent passes away, does it find another mate, or how does that work out?
Yes, they do. And in fact, one of the reasons that we think this cooperative breeding evolved was in response to limited habitat. So if there's not room for you, if there's not habitat available for you to move into and get your own territory, you will tend to stay with your parents and wait and watch for an opening. So because there are all these helpers, what they ultimately want to do is they want to be a member of the breeding pair in their own in their own territory, but that's not available to them. And so they're staying with their parents, they're staying at home and hoping something opens up that they can move into. So yes, when a member of the pair dies, they're in a strong and healthy population of scrub jays. There are helpers all around, and some neighbor will move over and pair up with the surviving adult.
It won't be one of the offspring, though.
No,
That's because that would
typically not.
That would be bad for the genetics.
Yes.
Thanks.
Irene, you're going to have the last question.
Oh, it was just a quickie. I'm thinking all living things need water, but where's the water source in these very dry environments?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I bet a lot of it comes from little dew droplets and mist, or also just from eating things that have moisture in them, because there's not typically a water source in the scrub. Now, places where there's a community that abuts right up to the scrub jays will readily go to bird baths and get water, but normally they wouldn't have that.
Interesting.
All right. Well, thank you, Audrey, so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure other people did too. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about scrub jays. This was really nice, and thanks for all the great questions.
So does anybody have a humanist sharing moment? Anything going on in your life you want to let other people know about? Okay. Next week, our topic is how to stop authoritarianism across the globe. Not a small task, by the way. That's going to be a video. And then on Wednesday night, 7 to 8, we have our open discussion on any topic, Zoom only. So my closing words are from Walt Whitman, Leaves of Grass. This is what you should do. Love the earth and sun and the animals, despise riches. Give alms to everyone that asks. Stand up for the stupid and crazy. Devote your income and labor to others. Hate tyrants. Argue not concerning God. Have patience and indulgence toward the people. Take off your hat to nothing known or unknown, or to any man or number of men. Re-examine all you have been told at school or church or in any book. Dismiss what insults your own soul, and your very flesh shall be a great poem. Walt Whitman.
Here.
All right, everybody, have a wonderful Sunday. Thanks for tuning in. And we will see you either Wednesday night, or we'll see you Saturday at the fair, or we'll see you next Sunday. Thanks, and thanks for your patience with our technical issues again.
Oh, that was great. You did well.